Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Jonathan here with another Twinmotion video, and today we're going to take our first look at Twinmotion 2025.2, the preview release. There's some really nice new features that you're going to love to see, and here is the introduction from the new Twinmotion sort of website. So I think they've had a really nice overhaul of that. Do take a look. So if you do go to the documentation stage, you'll see the release notes for 2025.2 preview. So at the moment, we've got some incredible new features that I'll be running through, quite a few of these in the video today for you, but the really big one is the introduction of Nanite. Now, Nanite technology is something that was introduced in Unreal Engine 5, and basically is a virtualized geometry system that allows you to basically create really high polygon count meshes and sort of scenes. So this should really improve the performance of Twinmotion for both Mac users and Windows users, and we'll see how this worked in real examples on my Mac. So I was very pleased to do this whole tutorial for you on my MacBook Pro, and I have to say it was super reliable. Now we've also got some cool other features like parallax windows and also 3D graphs. I'll be going into those in this tutorial too. There's a nice reduction in the installer size, so you'll notice that when you download Twinmotion, it's a lot smaller. So basically the libraries, you can add them as required too. I really love the new fog cards they've introduced. This gives you a lot of flexibility to really create some nice atmosphere into your designs, and it's super simple to use, and it just really kind of like means that you can kind of create a wonderful atmosphere. Pretty cool too. So we'll also be looking at the exploder animations, just a quick touch on those. This means that you can create some really dynamic presentations and explain how your model fits together. You know, in an architectural sense, it's pretty cool to be able to explode the model and show the different floor plans. So there's some really nice new features, as you can see. I would definitely recommend taking a look at the release notes. It seems to be one of the biggest releases for absolutely years. Way too much for this video, so I'll be coming on to some of these in other videos. So do remember, if you are new around here, please like and subscribe and hit that bell so that you don't miss my future videos on this. So I'll also talk about the few features on the material dock improvements. This is a day-to-day improvement that everybody will find super productive in their workflow, and things like the multi-material drop tool, really great little attribute and asset as well. So with that said, let's jump into this first look at Twinmotion 25.2. As I say, this entire tutorial was made on my Mac. So if you're a Mac user, I think Twinmotion is running really well on my M4 Max Mac, and I would definitely encourage you to take a look at this amazing new software. Okay, so here we are in the Epic Games launcher. You can see that I've got all these different versions of Twinmotion. The latest one there is the preview version, so not quite a full release yet. There's some nice little release notes as we talked about, and if you look at the new launcher, a nice couple of improvements here as well, including some really great new templates, particularly for automotive and maybe product as well. There's only really one for architecture. I'd really like to see some more architectural templates. Twinmotion, come on, architecture is a big market for your product. We definitely need some more templates for that. But basically, doing anything else, product and automotive, there's a ton of templates here for you to check out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is basically let's open up one of the templates. And I think what we'll do is let's just start with one of the learning templates. One of my favorite ones that I really like is this Lake House Retreat. You know, this is one of the other architectural templates we can use. So I'm going to open up this one to have a little test. Now you do need to download those if you haven't got them already. Once downloaded though, you'll be able to kind of open those up. Also, one thing that is nice on the home screen now, you can easily access all your plugins, Datasmith plugins and so on for any CAD application that you might be using. You'll notice also you can access and download the starter pack or the standard library packs from here. So one of those new features for Twinmotion is the installer is a lot smaller now. It's about half the size or maybe less. So basically the libraries are on the cloud until you need them. Now, while that can be maybe a little bit more time consuming to download those in the middle of a workflow, it does mean that you have more flexibility to choose the libraries you want. Okay, so one thing I did note is that because of that cloud library storage, when you first open some files, it wants to recover the textures and materials and objects from the cloud. So this is kind of cool. It seems like it's pretty automated, and it didn't take too long. I've got really good full fiber now, finally, in my home office. So this made a big difference. If you're on a slow internet connection, this might take a little bit longer to do the update. Once you've done it once, you can save the file and you'll be done. Okay, cool. So you can see the progress there. We're pretty much at 100%. We've recovered all the cloud content. And I like the way it actually shows you little cloud icons in the scene until these have updated. It's also quite cool the fact you can move around and basically start working even while it's updating. Interesting. Okay, so let's have a quick look at one of the big new features here. So I've got my library that I can hide away, and really you'll notice that I can go to my performance and basically have a look at how many frames a second I'm getting. So as I said before, I decided I would do this tutorial completely on my MacBook. I run an M4 Max with 36 gig of RAM, 32 core GPU, so pretty high spec MacBook Pro, and I plug that into 2 or 3 external monitors as well, depending on what I'm doing. But really, I was finding that Twinmotion was running really well on my Mac with this new version. So I'm really interested to see what the underlying performance has done, particularly with the new Nanite improvements that we'll find in this version. So as you can see, I can basically, if I want to, right click and convert any of the objects in the Twinmotion file to Nanite. So you can see the Nanite processing taking a second. What it's essentially doing is taking the meshes and converting them all to virtualized geometry. And this essentially means that it will kind of like really efficiently optimize your file. Now, I would recommend not doing this for the whole scene. I did try this before and I found that actually the scene was a bit slower. So I think some of the trees and things, there was no need to optimize those with Nanite at this stage. But certainly for the architecture, it seemed like a good idea. So if you do convert the entire scene to Nanite, you can see it will take a little bit longer. And potentially, you might find that that will speed you up on your machine. But I found that when I converted the entire scene, it actually slowed me down. So be careful on that one. Okay, so you can see that we're processing, converting all those trees to Nanite. It's kind of cool how you can convert them either as you import them or actually while you're working in the scene. So now we've converted those, let's take a look at our stats once again. You can see actually in this circumstance my frame rate dropped. So word of warning, don't convert the entire scene necessarily, certainly on the Mac anyway. Maybe with a RTX graphics card this would be a bit more optimized, but it definitely helped for the architecture and the other kind of libraries. So I think, things like furniture, the architecture, and those sort of big meshes, but maybe not things like the nature and the trees as well. So if I just go down to the settings here, one of the things you'll notice now is we've got 4 different modes for the way we can display our viewport. We've got the default mode, we've got the unlit mode, and you can see the frame rate improves quite a bit with these different modes, and then the wireframe mode in that sort of pink effect. But the one I really want to show you was the Nanite mode. So now, just to prove that we have converted our whole scene to Nanite, if we go into the Nanite viewing mode, you can see here is Nanite being shown to us. And you can now make out all of these amazing triangles that have been converted. And what you do notice as you move forward or backwards in the scene, basically what Twinmotion is doing, like Unreal Engine does, is basically on the fly, kind of loading in more geometry when required or simplifying the scene as required. So such an amazing feature to have in Twinmotion now. It's super exciting. Now, as I said before, if you just want to convert the odd object into Nanite, you just simply select it. And then down in your properties dialog, you can see there's an enable Nanite feature there. So here I've just, on this one, just converted those 2 chairs. And you can see that my frame rate is looking pretty good. So bearing in mind, I think I'm in ultra settings at the moment. So what I might want to do is drop that down to maybe medium or high settings as well. Now, one of the other nice new features I think personally users will find useful is the fact that the libraries are, vast with Twinmotion. Now, that meant previously when you installed the software, it was a huge download, sometimes like 15, 18 gigabytes. So when I had a slow internet connection, this could take all day. So now for users, we don't need to download all of the libraries until we require them. So you'll notice that you do have the option to click on the high level button for the library to download it. And that means that like all these bushes are now downloading pretty rapidly. So now I've got good internet finally at home in my home office. Everything's working very smoothly. For those of you with slow internet connections, you'll be glad that you've got the ability just to download the libraries you actually need rather than sort of everything in one bundle. So I think this is a good improvement overall. It seems to be the way most software is going, like Vectorworks have done this too. They kind of like have a lot of content that they update quite regularly, and that content is kind of best placed on the cloud rather than on your local hard drive at installation. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I can see why they've done this. Only downside, I think, is you've just got to spend a bit of time anticipating the objects, materials, and textures you might need in a project before you kind of get going. Otherwise, it can interrupt your workflow a little bit as you're working. Okay, so I wanted to see how the new import worked, converting to Nanite at the same time. So I've just gone over to my favorite CAD software of Vectorworks for this eco home project that I designed a few years ago. Do check out some of my videos on the latest Vectorworks if you're a Vectorworks user, but you can see that I'm just going to go ahead and export this as a Datasmith file. I was keen to see if they've made any improvements in the Datasmith export and import, but I really wanted to see how this would convert to Nanite at the first instance. So what you can see is I've hidden away the lake house retreat in this particular project, and I'm going to go ahead and open my Datasmith file, which is honestly pretty tiny. So this time you'll notice that I can actually enable Nanite at the import stage, which is super cool. So this means that I can basically import my geometry, create that virtualized geometry in Twinmotion, but also benefit from any kind of like scenes or anything else I've set up before in this example. I do like the new import. It gives me a lot more feedback. Previously, it was a bit sort of progress bar with just guessing what was happening. Now it actually tells me what it's processing, and it's pretty zippy as well. So here we can see the scene from the Lake House Retreat with my home in, and I think you'll agree, this is a nice little context to place my project. So I'm going to basically spin my model around, just click onto that option there, and let's just type in 180 degrees to get the rear view of my house there. So here we go. My project is sat very nicely in this lovely context here. I'm going to do a little bit of tidying up, maybe move a tree or delete that tree there just so I get a proper view of the project. Let's hide that one. Okay, so here we are in our scene. That import process from Vectorworks on Mac was very, very smooth. And I've now converted over my building that I've imported to Nanite. Now the rest of the scene I've left unconverted. So when I change over to the Nanite viewer, you can see the only thing that I actually see is those Nanite triangles. Here you can see that as you move forward and backwards, the Nanite triangles constantly are adjusting somewhat to basically create more geometry as required and more detail if needed. So this really kind of speeds up the workflow, and it does mean that Twinmotion can now handle really, really big files. So a very, very cool little feature. Okay, so what I'm going to show you next is to do with the materials. So let's just pop open to the materials manager here. And I want to show you some nice new improvements that they've made to the materials dock. So the first one is we've now got the ability to create folders. This means that we can actually organize our Twinmotion files into groups of materials or textures, and we can rename those as required and just simply drag and drop these materials in. Now this does make the organization a lot easier and more aligned with other software potentially that used in the architectural industry. So having all of your materials in one big place made it a bit confusing, and it was a bit tricky sometimes to find the one you were looking for. So nice welcome improvement, and Twinmotion, I think, this is a good little workflow improvement here that you've made. And see also different filters. So with different filters, you can actually basically look at different types of materials or textures using those filters. So again, much easier to find what you're looking for. Finally, you'll notice they've added a search bar, so when you know the name of the texture, you can easily search for that too. I do like the way you can move them around, so if you want to prioritize different orders, you can, but you can also flick over to alphabetical view too. So great improvements onto the material dock and the way that's managed as well. So I just want to focus now on a really nice improvement to the grass material. So grass came in the last release of Twinmotion, and have to say it was a massive update. You just drag and drop your grass and you can see without really affecting your performance, you've got really realistic looking grass in there. Now, there were some nice presets in the previous version, but now we've got even more. There's 15 different presets for our grass, and I think you'll agree there's just way more usability here than there was before. So selecting those presets, just super easy. You can see as I go through, with a simple click, it just applies the grass where I need it. And one really cool new feature, as well as all these new presets, is the ability to add accent meshes. You can essentially add another mix into the plants here. So not only have you got the presets, you've got the different style of grass, longer grass, shorter grasses as well. Finally, you've also got the accent meshes. So let's just scroll down and add some of those. By the way, you can also scale and preview and sort of cut and change things like fuzziness and spawn angle too. So a real wealth of control over that 3D grass. It's very easy for me to add these accent meshes into the design. And I got a really nice sort of functionality on things like probability and even color as well. So really great improvement. And I think, this will really speed up the process of creating scenes with lots of sort of grasses or terrain as well. Finally, you'll notice some nice new settings at the top here. We've got the main panel, but we've also got those sub-panels for things like miscellaneous and assignment too. So they've really worked hard to tidy up both the materials dock and also the materials properties dialog too. So some great improvements. The final thing is, don't forget you can save these as presets if you do want to. So this means you can recall these on future projects or just speed up your workflow anytime you need. So very, very welcome and really cool new features for materials and textures. As I say, I've now saved that as a preset so I can use that again on a future project as required. So very, very nice little improvement there. Now the next new feature I want to focus on is a brand new one for Twinmotion. It's a really interesting one. So go back to library. Let's have a look under our objects. It's actually called Parallax windows. So these are really interesting. What they are is basically a 2D texture, but basically they give the illusion of three-dimensionality. So for example, if I drag in maybe a residential one into the scene, you can see I'll just drop it behind the glass, so potentially just sort of put it there. And what I can actually do is modify things like the size of it easily using the scaling dialog. So let me just scale that down so it fits a bit more nicely. We'll just sort of push it into the scene. So I'll go to my move tool and let's just sort of move it back a bit. So we'll move it kind of back as if it's behind the glass there. So I think that looks cool. Now we can play around with that exposure. The most important thing is as you move around, do you see the impression that it sort of looks three-dimensional in there, almost like there's actually objects in the scene? So that's the idea of parallax windows. They basically, instead of having real objects, which I did actually do for this scene, as you can see, there is some stuff in there. There's a bed and a side table. That took me a bit of a while to introduce, but I could have saved a bit of time. If I want to, for example, like make this room into a gym now, I can just drag in a parallax window of my gym, go to my scaling. So let's just do that one more time. A nice quick way to do this is just scale the whole thing down if required. So we can either kind of shrink it vertically or horizontally as well. So boost up the exposure is quite nice because it does mean that behind those windows where it's a bit darker, you can kind of like just get it to match the ambience of the scene. You'll notice there's also a night mode. So basically you probably won't notice the night mode till you drop the ambience of the overall scene. So that's something we'll take a look at in a moment. But yeah, you can see it's just really fun to play with these new parallax windows. Now there's a really nice set. You've got residential ones, you've got a couple for the gym, you've got some sort of more commercial ones as well. And I have noted that you can actually go online and buy different packs of parallax windows. So, you'll be able to load those in and expand your library too. So we've got some nice little settings for things like the width and the height. Here we can see, again, we can stretch horizontally and vertically. So you have a real control. I think you'll find that you can really make these as you require them. We can also go down to the offset values as well. So you should be able to kind of get those working well in your scene very, very straightforwardly. I was finding just scaling them to fit did me very, very nicely. Maybe there's another option for that I've missed so far. So what do you think of the new parallax windows, everybody? Personally, I think these are a great time saver. I do like the way that you can kind of change things like the exposure levels very easily. And if we do go to maybe a night mode in a second, you'll see how this works. So to do that then, just going to go over to my ambience and essentially switch over to a different time of day. So what I might do is actually kind of just go and create an image for this. So let's go to my ambience panel and let's change that time of day to more of a nighttime shot. So now we're here at nighttime. You can see, let's just set an image up for this and just click plus to save that image. You can see those parallax windows are really glowing. So very, very nice improvement. You can see the lumen just took a little second or two to re-render there. But basically, I think you'll see that these look really convincing. And I do like things like the reflections and the lighting coming from the parallax windows as well. So pretty impressive. I can sort of change that exposure or brightness for those parallax windows as required. Just sort of a bit over bright before. And you can also give a nice sort of kind of yellowy tint to it if you want that sort of warmer color too. So, I think this is a really cool way to enhance your images, particularly for things like commercial projects or offices as well. If you're doing big residential buildings where you certainly haven't got time to model furniture inside every single apartment. So parallax windows, a really nice new feature for Twinmotion. Definitely something I'll be incorporating into my projects and workflow. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys, and I'll be interested to see if you've used these before in any other software as well. So you can see that here on my Mac, Twinmotion is running very nicely. Maybe not quite as smooth and quite as sort of zippy as it would on my RTX graphics card or my Windows PC. But the ability just to run on a MacBook Pro, in real time is something that we kind of forget that only a few years ago was just sort of not really feasible. So advances in hardware and software have kind of made this a dream come true for architects who want to use real-time rendering software within their workflows. So the next one I really want to show you, next new feature, is fog cards. Now these are just so easy to implement. I was just blown away by how cool these are. You can see I've just tracked in from the library under the VXF kind of category, this fog card. And it's honestly a case of just sort of simply moving it around where I want it. So let's move it behind the building there. And you've got that lovely motion fog. I can copy that across, have another copy. And look, within a few seconds, I've added something that would be quite hard to achieve in any other way. So I've noticed there's loads of cool settings for the fog cards, things like affected by wind, you can see them blowing across the scene. Also changing things like the opacity and the density as well. But what do you think about this? I think it really adds a lot of atmosphere into your designs, and it means that you can basically really enhance that atmospheric sort of feel and look of your project very, very easily. Now, perfect, these new fog cards, things like having a bit of fog over the lake there in the scene, maybe early in the morning. I really think the fog cards look amazing, and basically you can view these in full screen. Let's just look into our full screen mode. So we'll just pop into the full screen mode, and here we go, this wonderful real-time running on my Mac, fog blowing in the wind, the wonderful water rippling away. This is the kind of thing that Twinmotion is just so great for, real-time visualization of your architectural projects and interior projects. I just think it's so amazing that we live in a time when we have access to these tools as designers. So it's definitely something I really enjoy in my personal workflow. I enjoy teaching this as well. So if you do want some training on Vectorworks or Twinmotion or any of the real-time rendering software, please reach out to me and I'll be very pleased to help. So the other thing that I've noticed about things like the fog cards, they look really, really great when you look at them at night as well. So they do respond to the light shining through. So let's just kind of go into our model, just drag in one more fog card there, and we'll just drop that down. And let me just see if we can kind of switch over to maybe more of a night view, just to demonstrate what I mean about the fog cards looking so good at the night time as well. Now I'm going to just move those into a container. Let's call that fog cards, just so I can turn them on and off with a single click. So again, that's a good little tip if you just want some visuals with them on and other visuals with them off. Okay, so let's go through to one of our kind of like eye-level shots here and maybe kind of create a new scene for like a nighttime view and see how these look. So let's go through and just basically adjust the time of day. So here we are at night with that wonderful fog. I'm just going to click on the plus sign and generate a brand new view here. And I think you'll agree this scene has really come to life with both those parallax windows in the scene, which are nicely lit, We've got those fog cards as well. And finally, just to touch it off, if I just drop in a light source and drag that up, you'll begin to sort of see how this interacts potentially with the fog as well. I might need to move that light a little bit. There we go, and expand it out. You can see the fog in the distance. So do remember, in order for the fog to be seen at night, you probably need to add some sort of light into the scene a bit more. As you can see, that really looks good in the background now. That fog sort of glowing behind the building. So things like smoke and fog, and also kind of effects for things like entertainment as well. This is going to make a huge difference for these industries. So I just think it's incredible how Twinmotion have done this all in real time. The amount of sort of particles that the fog stimulates is pretty insane. So I really like the full screen mode. I really like the way you can kind of scroll through those different times of the day in real time. And this is something that I like to do when I'm presenting to my clients, if I'm kind of trying to sort of show them some different ideas as well. So the real-time kind of preview in full screen is definitely a wonderful thing. And, you can see that now with the addition of these wonderful fog cards, we've just got this really nice atmospheric rendering style. So let me know what you think in the comments. I think this is, maybe not my favorite feature, but it's certainly one that I'll be using quite a bit from now on. Okay, great. So now we're on to maybe the final big feature I just want to talk about, which is the new animators that Twinmotion have introduced in this version. So you can see that if we do want to, we can basically just play around with our grass just before we kind of get going, and just using that new nice 3D grass material one more time. And what I've done here, I've just imported the 3D model just into a new scene, basically so that we can easily demonstrate how this works, this new feature. Okay, so you can see my model is imported with those layers intact. So it just means that I can easily turn those layers off when I want to. Now those layers came straight through from Vectorworks, so this was extremely easy for me to set up. If I do want to, I can also just align my camera. I just really want to show you how I can kind of do top-down views. So let's go to my align camera button and just click onto that floor. So that should give me a perfect top-down view. So if you have got a model and you want to maybe turn off those other layers, do remember that this is a very good tip, just to use the align camera so that you can generate sort of things like rendered floor plans. So one thing you might want to do, as well as sort of setting up that view, is just sharpen up things like the shadows. So just remember when you kind of go into your settings that those will be available for you to sharpen up under the render tab. Okay, so I'm going to turn the vignetting off. Let's turn that off so it's a bit cleaner. Going to maybe boost up the exposure a little bit here. And as I say, if I go through to the shadows there, we can adjust that time of day. We can also adjust things like the north offset, so potentially you can simulate real studies here too. Now, under the render tab, as I say, you've got the shadow, so if I kind of slide the bias up and down, I can sharpen those shadows up to be nice architectural shadows, which looks really cool, I think. Excellent. So this is the new sort of feature really for top-down view. And basically, look, I just wanted to update this. Let's turn on the next layer. Let's update maybe a new image. So I can create a first floor plan, and we'll do a final one for our top floor plan. As well as actually setting up the top-down view in the plan, what we can do is actually use our animators. So I want to show you how you can kind of explode your model into something really dynamic and interesting using these new exploding animators. So if you go to the tools menu, you'll see a whole little section called exploders. These are basically things that you can drag into the drawing, and you see immediately kind of you'll get a little preview potentially of what's happening. But what happens is you need to drag the objects into the exploder so that they become, if you like, a child of that exploder. And now you can see the ground floor, whole ground floor has started to move. The first floor as well, and drag the roof in. So all three layers are now within there. And you can begin to see the effect of what we're trying to produce. So the model's sort of pulling apart and then rebuilding as well. Now with the exploder, there's quite a few different settings. So if I do want to kind of just move that around, I can kind of basically slide up the amplification factor there. So this is actually pretty nice. The roof's pulling away nicely. You get a couple of glitches with the on-screen rendering, but don't worry about that. That's literally just the lumen while you're doing the actual preview. When you actually render this out in full screen, it will look absolutely fine. Okay, cool. So you can see that you can also do things like adjust the start and the end point, the amplification factor, also things like the origins and staggering as well. Now, I've only really just started to get my head around all the different options here. There really is quite a lot to play with, so maybe this will demand another video in the future, which we can focus on just how we can create exploded plans. But I just thought that was a really fun thing to show you. Now, don't forget, if you do want to reach out for Twinmotion training, or you're interested in buying the Twinmotion software, I can supply that for you, both the training and the software. I'll be very pleased to have a chat with you and help you out with any advice as well. Let's play out with the final outputs that I made in this particular video using a few still images and a few little sections of video. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.